Imagine waking up one morning in Washington, D.C., and realizing that the very pillars of American democracy, freedom of speech, the independence of institutions, the separation of powers, are slowly being bent, reshaped, and perhaps even destroyed by one man. For more than 2 centuries, the United States has been the world's loudest defender of democracy. But today, many Americans are asking a terrifying question. Are we still living in a democracy? Or is the United States quietly, step by step, moving towards dictatorship under Donald Trump? This is not a small debate. It is a battle for the soul of America. And in this video, we'll dive into how emergency powers in D.C., the takeover of police authority, and the shocking attempt to fire Federal Reserve officials are creating a storm that could reshape the very idea of freedom in America. The fragile line between democracy and dictatorship democracy doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes in silence, brick by brick, rule by rule, one institution at a time. History has shown us that authoritarianism doesn't always arrive with tanks on the streets. Sometimes it comes disguised as law and order, national security, or economic stability. And right now, Donald Trump is testing those very boundaries. When Trump calls Washington, D.C., a city of chaos, and pushes for emergency powers, he isn't just making political noise. Emergency powers give a president extraordinary authority. Authority to bypass normal checks and balances. Authority to control budgets. Even authority to deploy military or federal forces domestically. For his supporters, this might sound like strong leadership. But for democracy, it feels like a warning siren. The takeover of police powers. Now let's talk about policing. Under Trump's vision, the line between federal power and local autonomy is blurring dangerously. The police, traditionally controlled at state and local levels, are increasingly being placed under federal oversight in ways America hasn't seen before. Trump has repeatedly signaled that law and order must come before protests, before dissent, even before democratic rights. Think about it. In a true democracy, the police are meant to serve the people. But in an authoritarian system, the police serve the leader. They silence critics, they enforce loyalty, and they crush opposition. So, when Trump talks about taking control of policing across the Capitol, it's not just a policy change. It's a direct step toward centralizing power, a step dictators throughout history have always taken. The Federal Reserve crisis. And then comes one of the most shocking moves, Trump's attempt to fire Federal Reserve officials. For decades, the Federal Reserve has been independent, a safeguard to ensure that America's economy is not manipulated by politics. But Trump's move to push out officials like Lisa Cook is unprecedented. Never before in U.S. history has a president tried to fire a Fed governor simply because they don't align with his agenda. Why does this matter? Because the Federal Reserve controls interest rates, inflation policy, and ultimately the financial stability of the entire nation. If Trump succeeds in making the Fed his puppet, he would essentially control not just America's politics, but also its economy. Imagine a single man holding both the sword of political power and the shield of economic control. That's not democracy. That's dictatorship dressed in a suit and tie. The emotional impact on Americans. For everyday Americans, this isn't just about politics. It's about life. It's about whether their protests will be silenced, whether their savings will be manipulated for political gain, whether the police they see on the streets will serve their communities or serve the president's orders. Mothers worry if their children's future will be safe. Workers fear that the rules of the economy could change overnight depending on Trump's moods. Students ask themselves if freedom of expression will still exist in their classrooms. And veterans, the very people who fought for America's freedom, now wonder if the democracy they defended is slipping away in front of their eyes. The global stakes, and let's not forget the global stage. For decades, the United States has stood as a symbol of democracy worldwide. When other nations fell into dictatorship, America was the voice of resistance. But if Trump bends the rules at home, how can America criticize authoritarian regimes abroad? What moral authority will remain? Imagine Russia, China, or North Korea pointing at the US and saying, "You're no different from us." That would be a global humiliation of democracy itself. So, is Trump really turning America into a dictatorship? Maybe not yet, but he is certainly laying down the stepping stones.